Have you ever looked at someone else's problem and thought to yourself, is this really what being this upset about? Maybe you have even said it. It's not that serious. You'll be fine. Just move on. But here's something I've been thinking about lately. Pain is not always measured by what happened. Sometimes pain is measured by what you expected to happen. And I think that is something we don't really consider enough when we are dealing with other people's pain. Because the same event can happen to two different people and they can experience completely different levels of pain. Let me explain. Imagine two women who have been married for 5 years and they do not have a child. Outwardly, the situation looks exactly the same. 5 years of marriage, no children. But imagine that the first woman spent those 5 years believing that by now she would have a house that is filled with children. On her wedding day, she pictured herself 5 years later with little children running around her. She expected it. She planned for it. She saw it in her future. And then 5 years passed, and reality looked nothing like the picture that was in her head. Now, imagine another woman in exactly the same situation, but she grew up in a family where infertility was extremely common. She had watched women in her family experience the same thing. So, somewhere in her mind, she had already accepted the fact that that may be her case too. Now, tell me, will these two women necessarily experience the same levels of pain? Absolutely no. The circumstance is the same, but the expectation is different. And sometimes, the greater the distance between expectation and reality, the greater the pain. This is why losing something does not hurt us as much as losing what we thought we were going to have. This is where we make a terrible mistake. Now, imagine someone loses $20,000. You have $100 million sitting in your own account. You look at them and you think, it's only $20,000. But what if that $20,000 was everything that they had? You are not necessarily looking at their pain. You are looking at their pain through your circumstances. And that is a dangerous thing to do because you can never fully understand the weight of something by looking only at the thing itself. You have to understand what that thing meant to the person carrying it. A broken phone may be an inconvenience to you, but to someone else, it may be the only device they use to run their business. A failed exam may be disappointing to you, but to someone else, it may feel like the collapse of the future they spent years imagining. A breakup may be something you recover from in a few weeks, but to someone else, it may be the death of a future they already emotionally built with another person. You see the event, they see the meaning of the event, and those two are not the same thing. This is probably one of the biggest mistakes we make when we try to comfort people. You see, someone is hurting, and we say, I understand your pain. Sometimes we mean well, but how do you know you understand someone else's pain? You may have experienced something similar, but you did not live their life. You did not have their expectations. You did not carry their history. You did not lose exactly what they lost. You don't know what that thing represented to them. So instead of saying, I understand your pain, sometimes the most honest thing to say is something like this. I may not completely understand what you're feeling right now, but I'm here for you. I'm here with you. Now, there's humility in that because you are not trying to measure their pain. You are not trying to fix their pain. You are just simply telling them, you don't have to carry this moment all by yourself. And sometimes that is all that people need. Not an explanation, not a motivational speech, not somebody telling them that everything will be okay. Sometimes they just need someone who is willing to, sit with them in that uncomfortable situation and reality of of the things that has just happened to them. And it is for this reason I believe in realistic optimism. Now, I want to be careful here as much as possible. You see, understanding pain does not mean that we should become pessimistic. It doesn't mean that we should constantly expect the worst. It doesn't mean we should walk through life waiting for everything to fall apart. But I do think there is something dangerous about an optimism that refuses to acknowledge reality. Because if you convince yourself that nothing bad can happen, then when something bad happens to you, you are not only dealing with the event, you are dealing with the shock of discovering that life will not always follow the script you wrote for it. That is why I think sometimes we need to look at the negative possibilities of life. Not because we are pessimists, but because we don't want our optimism to become a delusion. I can hope for the best while still acknowledging that the worst is possible. I can believe that my marriage will be beautiful while understanding that marriage will still have difficult seasons. I can believe that my business will succeed while accepting the fact that I may fail. I can believe that I will achieve my dreams while understanding that some of the things that I desperately want may never happen. Now, that is not pessimism, that is maturity. Because hope is not the denial of reality. Hope is looking at reality honestly and still choosing not to surrender, still insisting, and still being resilient. And I think I would conclude with this. The next time you see someone hurting over something that doesn't seem significant to you, pause. Before you say, it's not that serious, ask yourself, what did they expect? What did this mean to them? What did they lose beyond this thing? Because sometimes a person is not just crying over $20,000. They are crying because the $20,000 represented security to them. Sometimes they are not grieving over a relationship itself. They are grieving the future they imagined with that person. They are devastated because today destroyed something they had already been expecting for years. And that is why I have become very careful about undermining people's pain. Because I may not understand why something hurts them so deeply, but that doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. The Bible says something, it says, weeping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning. Notice something about that verse. It doesn't say there is no night. It says weeping may endure for a night. So the night is acknowledged. The pain is acknowledged. But the night is not giving the final word. And maybe that's how we should approach people too. Don't deny someone's night simply because you are standing in your own daylight. You may not understand their pain. You may not even think you would be hurt if you were in their position. But you don't have to understand people's pain to respect it. Sometimes compassion simply means looking at another person's wound and resisting the temptation to measure how much it should hurt.